Hi and welcome. I'm Sally Wilson, and it's a great pleasure to have as my guest today Craig Rispin, who's a business futurist and innovation expert. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks for having me. I can't wait to have our conversation. Who knows where it's going to go?
Well, I tell you what, I'm already feeling expansive and like possibilities are boundless with that background you've got there.
Well, I'm celebrating a space today because there's all sorts of things coming in space. Really excited about what Elon is doing. And
Yeah.
I have a little claim to fame that there's a little tiny satellite, one of these micro satellites out in space with my signature on it. And I have to tell you, Sally, I never expected that to happen. Yes, but it was a little Australian space satellite company. And they said, Craig, you were so helpful introducing an investor to us. So will you sign our satellite before it goes up on Elon's Falcon 9 rocket? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be cool. Yes.
That's so exciting.
I know. I was just like blown away. I'm like, but no, those are all your engineers that have done all the hard work. And they said, well, we couldn't have got it on if it was for you. And I'm really, it was because of me. And they said, well, yeah, that's what the investors said, that you were promoting us. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. So,
But as you said, even before we started recording, Craig, you see your job as one of service.
yes, yes.
Can you describe what that means to you?
Right. Well, to be of service is to help others. And I love to help others. And when it comes to individuals, many times they come to me as individuals and say, I'm a bit lost. Perhaps they'll say, I'm a bit lost and I want to reboot my career. And so I'll point them in the right direction that they may have not considered. But typically, I'm working with leaders of organizations, chief executives, business owners of, sort of largest organizations in the country, and then networks of smaller businesses as well.
Yeah.
And I just really want to help them because I feel an empathy for their employees. If they don't have foresight and they're not good leaders and their business suffers, the employees suffer. And I've seen that so often. So that's typically how I help, is on an individual level with career or strategy advice, and then at the business level with business leaders. And I love what I do because people say I make a difference. And that's what I think I'm put on this earth to do.
So, Craig, what do you think are the important attributes of a great futurist?
Great. Well, I wrote a book about this called How to Think Like a Futurist. And I've also studied how to be a futurist. But if I could pull out maybe three highlights of what's been the best advice I've gotten from the greatest futurists in the world of how to be a great futurist, was one great futurist told me, go into a newsagent, and we still do have some of those, and look at the magazines rack and randomly choose a magazine that from an industry you've never worked in. And so I used to do this. I used to go into news agents and I'd pick up a random magazine, whether it be a Cat Fancy magazine or Aviation Week or Woman's Day or Field and Stream. And you can read through it and get a wide-ranging view of what's going on in that industry. And I still do that today in a little different way. If I get an inquiry from a company, right now I'm about to start a project looking at the next 5 years in the industry of steel. So what I will do is I will contact the peak industry group and get them to send me 3 to 6 months of their industry publication, which might be still in print or digital, and read what people are talking about are the biggest issues facing them as an industry. And I'm lucky enough that I get to work in about 50 plus different industries a year. So I guess that first tip that I got from that futurist to pick up a random magazine was to have that wide ranging view, cross industry, not a particular industry, and realize that in each of these little niches, there could be, multi-billion dollar, trillion dollar industries behind each of those industry magazines or consumer magazines. And that's what I've really found that really opened up my mind. So that's first, it's the diversity of thought. I think of, and being open to new thinking systems.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say thinking systems, we have all sorts of models that we use as futurists. So probably the best tip I've had is whenever you work with an organization, just don't jump into the details. Take that global view. So I'll always do a horizon scan of what's happening in their industry. And so what does that look like? So, stepping back and seeing what's coming over the horizon from a worldwide view, and then bringing that down to the local. So that's the model of, thinking global and bringing it local. So diversity of thought, and then global and local. And having these models of like scenario planning, that a lot of people know that futurists do scenario planning. And this is so important in a world now where it's changing so quickly, to have these wide-ranging understanding, global and local, and multiple possible futures. That's what scenario planning is. And so I think those are the three main tent poles of being a great futurist, is that wide view, the global and local, and multiple possible futures. I think that is a short course in how futurists think.
So, and this is very much aligned with the title of your book, How to Think Like a Futurist. So you're really saying that anyone can learn how to be a futurist.
Oh yes, because there's a great history of the techniques that have been perfected and used millions of times, with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of organizations of all types, and studied at university. What people really don't know about our community, and there is pretty big community of futurists. On one network I'm part of is 21,000 futurists there, and if you look at that community, it's about a third academics. So they're studying at university, they're doing research, they're the head of a particular industry focus, and then about a third are in governments and non-government organizations, and I run into them all the time. I remember presenting in Canberra years ago, and 3 young guys came up to me afterwards and said, "Craig, we've been following your career for a long time." And I said, "And who are you?" And they said, "We are the 3 futurists in the Defense Department." And I'm like, "Oh, how cool."
Wow.
Yeah, I know, what a great job to have. And then, so you got government and non-government organizations, and then there's the commercial side. And that's where I particularly come from, my background, and where I play, although I dabble with government departments and projects. They're not my main focus. And I do a bit in academia, but I find that often my points of view aren't really compatible with either government or academia very much. So I bump into things, and I have sharp elbows when I go there. And I don't try and do that, but it's hard when you're introduced at a university and the head of history kind of guffaws and laughs at you even before you start. I only get heckled when I work with government and universities. Yeah.
And I'm interested in that because I imagine you do encounter resistance, not only from people who are coming from a different perspective, different background, different training, but also I imagine when you're working with individuals, because you do individual mentoring as well, and also with companies and businesses, in order to fully embrace what you have to say, they have to change their thinking, right?
They do. And so when I really think about what my role is as a futurist, I am, working in this whole idea of mind shift.
Mm.
And what I found is, especially if people want to change, they really have to shift their worldview. They can't have the same worldview and then change their behavior, I've found.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is so important, and it's been studied in areas of psychology and NLP and all sorts of areas, that you really have to change your worldview. And it's a good thing because I know how to change people's worldview, because I just revealed to them how the world has changed. It's already changed, and maybe they haven't changed.
Yeah.
And how, yes, the future for many people, when they hear me speak, is a little bit scary,
Yes,
but also massively optimistic. I'm an optimistic futurist. There are some pessimistic futurists out there that say the world is, going to hell in a handbag, and we're going to blow ourselves up. But they haven't been right so far. So,
yeah, I'm really glad about that, right?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so does that sort of, the subtitle of your book is Know First, Be First, Profit First.
Yes, yes. That's my mantra in the commercial space. Now, profit first might mean just profiting from knowledge.
Yes.
So when I'm working with not-for-profits, I go, can we take profit out? And I go, no, because we can profit from knowledge. And even if you just want to get up to a zero budget. But anyway, yes. And really, if you think about that, knowing first, that's foresight. But if I try, my audience of CEOs, if I try and sell them foresight, they think that's something they don't need. But knowing first is really useful to business leaders of all types. So it's foresight, and then being first. That's being, taking a stand on that future, placing a bet, and innovating and being first. That's what innovation is. And then profit first. And that's really my background. I come from a background of actually using foresight and innovation, and then commercialization. That's the profit side. And that's really the definition of entrepreneurship. It is creativity applied for commercial gain. And so that's why I get to work with lots and lots of entrepreneurs. But I have to tell you, Sally, I've got this feeling, and it keeps on repeating over and over and over again. I'm back to doing live events now. No, Zoom was the thing for the past couple of years, but I'm sitting with leaders, and many times when I'm working with chief executives, it's cross-industry leaders in the room. So there'll be like 15 CEOs from every industry, a law office, a recruiter, typically a construction firm, travel industry, education, you name it, in these groups. Sometimes there's a not-for-profit as well. And I have to tell you what they're asking me. They're asking me, okay, what do we do next? What? These are leaders of, medium to large organizations. And I think, Sally, they're really lost right now. They tell me about the big problems they're having, and they don't seem to have any idea of how to fix them. So one big problem that they're talking about is when I ask the question, do you have a key position that you can't fill, that's legislated, maybe it's required for compliance, or it's the head of sales or marketing and you just can't get them, and it's really, really impacting your business, and all of them put their hand up.
Right.
And I say, oh, great, let's have a discussion about this. Who has a creative solution for how to fix this? And not a single hand goes up, Sally. And I think, wow, if they had the diversity of ideas and they looked global and local, and looked at possible scenarios of what might happen, then I think they would come up with some ideas.
Yeah, and it's very much kind of a trend in our society, isn't it? It's specializing to the point where you've got such tunnel vision that you actually can't even serve your specialization fully. And you brought up the two words that really stood out to me then. You get a feeling, right? So you're basing some of your ideas on feelings as well. Is that correct?
It is. So I have to have deep empathy for my customers to really truly understand them.
Yeah.
And so I really spend time to try and get them to take down their mask, that, I'm in charge and I know what I'm doing, and really be vulnerable and share with me some of their concerns. And I have to tell you, Sally, sometimes it takes a couple bottles of wine at the speaker dinner after the presentation. Sometimes it does,
Yeah.
And
does it ever take a game of golf? I'm just curious.
Sometimes something like that. And they'll admit to me, like, well, maybe I don't have the right team to be able to compete in the future, or the right strategy, or even this. I was working with a really big drug company. You would know who they are. They're world famous, multi-billion dollar drug company. And I was talking to them about the future of medicine. And then we went out to dinner. And yes, in that industry, lots of bottles of wine flowed. And a couple hours into the dinner, the country manager leaned over to me and said, "Hey, Rispin," sometimes they call me by my surname. "Hey, Rispin, just want to ask you this idea. You're representing how your daughter's working in personalized medicine, and how personalized medicine is going to mean that in a few days, you're going to be able to create a drug potentially that will solve an individual's unique cancer based on their unique DNA. And Craig, of course, that's really going to put us out of business. So how long do you think we have?" How about that for a question? How long do we have? And I said, well, maybe 10 to 15 years. And everybody was listening. They're hanging on what I was going to say. Like I had the answer or something, but I gave them a range, and they said, "Oh, wow, Craig, we think you're being very nice. In fact, we employ a lot of futurists to come and talk to us, and you guys are always quite conservative with your predictions. Like, you'll say 10 or 15 years and it'll happen in a short period of time." And I said, "So what was the consensus around the table?" And they said 8 years. 8 years until personalized medicine makes tablets for herds of people increasingly irrelevant and really disrupts their business plan. And we're seeing that right now with the amazing technology of the so it's mRNA technology that I don't know if you saw this TED talk that was published, but it was the chief scientist for Moderna. And she talked about they were working with that technology and trying to solve cancer. And then the pandemic hit, so they pivoted. And in an hour, they created the vaccine. And that's what this firm was worried about.
Right.
They're like, oh, so that technology could create a personalized drug in 40 days, essentially, for someone. And that just changes that business model. So this is what I run into frequently, is people hear my message and then question their future. And so they think then, well, what are the opportunities as well? And that's what I try and do, is reveal the unseen opportunities for these problems that they're facing that they think they can't overcome. But with a little foresight and innovation and applying it in their business, they usually can overcome it. But they need, especially my leaders, need more, say, tools in their tool bag to deal with these issues frequently. It's surprising to me that they would reveal to me, Sally, how lost they really are.
Yeah, and I can completely appreciate how important that trust is when you're working with people, because this is very, like you said, people making themselves very vulnerable. And I imagine also the vulnerability they're feeling, and also the stress and the fear is probably a big part of what prevents them from seeing opportunity too. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. If you look at research into my market chief executives, there's been tons of studies of them. And I remember just a few years ago, before the pandemic, few years before the pandemic, IBM consulting side did a huge survey of, I think it was almost 60,000 chief executives. And they asked them, what is the number one stressor for you, right? What is the number one thing top of mind? And I wasn't surprised when they confirmed what I was feeling and seeing with my clients is complexity, Sally. They are overwhelmed. They're overworked. They don't have time to think. They, especially during the last couple years, they've just been responding to change and trying to cope with massive shifts. And so they're tired, they're stressed, they're overworked, and something has to give. And I try and make suggestions to them that maybe their org chart needs updating. Oh, you got the same org chart from 2.5 years ago? That doesn't seem to be working. And you're still recruiting locally rather than globally. When you can't find people locally, that doesn't make sense. And you're not working on a new business model, like you're not adding a new business model, because that's where innovation really is coming now, is from new business models. So why aren't you adding new opportunities? Because we've seen anything is possible. Things can change overnight. We can shift directions almost instantly. We've proven that to ourselves. So why don't we take advantage of that? And some do, Sally, but I have to say, most do not. They just keep on doing the doing. And clearly, for most chief executives, it's maybe 1% that have figured out a way that they can work best and have that time to have a quiet mind and reflect on what you're doing, rather than just be overwhelmed with the doing and the complexity of being a chief executive. I really feel sorry for them. I really do. I remember being there myself, and it's all encompassing. And you'd really have to set that time aside to think about other things other than compliance or recruiting or, management issues.
Yeah. And I'd love to talk about, so in order to be creative, you have the broad view. You read the magazines about cats. You read that, you give yourself rich information in all different areas, right? So you've given yourself information, you've got the data, and then how does the creativity work? Because for me, some of the great futurists that I think of are Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, holy moly, Aldous Huxley. So, and there was such imagination there.
Incredible. Yeah. And what people don't really know is, in our community, we're these science fiction writers and artists, and I got a chance to hang out with them. And I know, I just pinched myself. I remember talking to the advertising industry, and myself and my wife got flown to Bermuda to talk to the worldwide presidents of this big advertising firm. And in Bermuda, you hop on these little mini buses, and they take you to the resorts, because there's not a lot of cars allowed on Bermuda. It's a small island. And I hop into this mini van, and there's a guy in a white leisure suit from the 1970s, and this was the late 1990s. And he introduces himself, and I just knew who it was instantly looking at him. He said, "Hi there, I'm Ray Bradbury." And all I could think to say to myself is, oh, it's one of my heroes. And so all I could say was, "I know it's you." And I mean, this is somebody who had an incredible imagination and could create these entire worlds around an idea like the burning of books in the future. Boy, are we starting to get back to there right now. That future that he predicted in Fahrenheit 451. Isn't that interesting? We may be back there now. And so, yes, creativity is so important. And one entrepreneur that was my client put me on retainer. He said, "Craig, you know what you need to do is take this retainer and just take a day off, think, and then come and talk to me about your thinking." And so, yes, he was giving me permission to be creative, to take that time. Yeah. And so for me, painting, I'm not an artist. Music, I've dabbled in that. But it's really, if you pursue any art, right? And art is creativity. You want to study the masters, and then you want to develop your own style. And I think I sort of do that. And I've never really considered myself a writer. In fact, my book, How to Think Like a Futurist, is just a bunch of my slides in a book. I literally created this book. And someone from Simon & Schuster saw it and said, "Oh, Craig, you knew that things were going this way." I said, "What?" They said, "Oh, yeah, 20-minute reads are the new thing. There's like TED books." They said, "You did a TED book before TED did." And I'm like, "Oh, is that on trend?" And then it was at the time. Yeah. And so I went a completely different way. I thought I want a full color book, every single page. And I'll just take my best slides from How to Think Like a Futurist and put it into the book. Because what do people want at the end of your presentation? Can I have a copy of your slides? Yeah, but they get the PowerPoint or Keynote. And what do they do with it? They forget it's there. Yeah. But a physical book, I'll pass it on to someone else. And boy, my books get passed around and people read them. Yeah. And so, yes, for me, I guess my creativity is, painting a story about the future and how we can get there, and the benefit that you'll have if you think like a futurist. You could come up with all these new opportunities you may not have considered. And so I guess that's my area. It's, it's a bit hard to relate business straight to creativity, but actually, if you look at the works of Dr. Peter Drucker, who wrote the original OG book on entrepreneurialism, he started the book with, to be an entrepreneur, it's the combination of creativity for commercial gain. And I guess the creative thinking comes from the futurist thinking. And then for me, the commercial gain is, let's launch something new. Let's create a new initiative. And they don't always work. In fact, I encourage, what I learned at being at Apple was failing fast. And so, not all of my projects have always been successful, but if you're doing them quickly and you iterate quickly instead of it taking a long time to do something, then you can have a few failures, but you'll have a few hits as well. And so that's something that, that when it comes to innovation, it's about rapid prototyping and trying different ideas with clients as quickly as you can. Yeah. And so I think that's what I stand for. And I guess it's useful thinking. A lot of people think so. It's amazing what they will write about me on LinkedIn. I think I'm delivering one thing, Sally, of what they get from it is completely different, but it must be helpful because they invite me back, for decades, invite me back. Yeah. One group hired me for 25 years. Every month I delivered a new presentation for 25 years. And basically they all retired and had completely different businesses at the end of our 25 years together. And I think, wow, the opportunities that I've fallen into because of what I do is just remarkable. I pinch myself every day. But I think I know why I'm here, Sally. Somebody came to my classroom when I was a youngster. I must have been 9 or 10. And he was a guest speaker, and he was just towered over everyone. He must have been 6'5" or 6'7". And this might be somebody that you've heard of or know. Do you know who Charlie Tremendous Jones was?
No, I don't.
Wow, Google him. He was part of the public speaking industry for so many years. And he made it his mission to upgrade young people's minds through books. And he started a charity, and he would go around speaking at schools, and he would talk about how, your future, where you'll be 5 years from now, will be on the books that you read and the conversations that you have. I remember him talking about this, not what special degree that you get or the title that you get, but it's the books that you read and the conversations that you have. And I remember him looking at me sitting on the floor and looking right at me. And I didn't have a name tag on. We didn't have that in classrooms. He looked right at me and he said, "Craig, you know what? You are 10 times better than you think you are." And then he pointed to Sally. I could imagine you sitting there in the classroom and said, "Sally, you are 10 times better than you think you are." And you know what? I couldn't believe that. I thought to myself, could that possibly be true? He planted a seed, and I have to tell you, I eventually got to see him again because he was part of one of my peer groups. And I said, you planted a seed that got me here all these years later. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "I'm happy to hear that, Craig." And that makes me so happy. And I said, "Really? How many times did you do that?" He said, "Do you know what? I set myself a mission to talk to 10 million school kids."
Wow.
And oh, wow, how about that for a goal? And introduce them to this idea that they might be 10 times better than they think. And it's the books and conversations that they have that will really make them. And I have to tell you, it just transformed my life. It planted a seed that I couldn't resist. I had to discover why I might be 10 times better than I think. I couldn't see it, you certainly can't see it when you're 10 years old. But boy, did that resonate with me. And imagine the change, the good that he did. That is a good thing. That is a kind thing. That is a gift that you're giving a young person. Imagine, how he changed America by talking to 10 million kids and getting them to believe in themselves and read books and have conversations. So inspiring. So I want to give him credit because I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for him and Ray Bradbury and Arthur C. Clarke and so many people. Gene Roddenberry, so the son of the creator of Star Trek, Eugene was a member of the Futurist Society. We could talk about his father. And so we've got all in our community, Sally, these very creative people that wrote science fiction and created ways for people to cope with the inevitable future or look at possible scenarios. And that created science fiction, our most successful movies in history. And they've always been part of our community. And for a long time, I thought to myself, I'm not nearly as creative as them, but I've come to accept I might have been better than I thought myself. And that what I do is I sort of paint with ideas that shifts people's minds like great art does.
So, Craig, you mentioned the inevitable future, the future that's
Mm,
coming. And a question that pops into my mind, because as I mentioned to you before this call, the observer effect fascinates me. So the fact that when we observe something, it has an effect in
it,
matter. And
mm,
so if we're conceiving of something, if we're imagining something, if, we're a science fiction writer, we're Leonardo da Vinci, helicopters. How much is, well, what are your thoughts on this at least? Is the future inevitable because we are observing it into happening?
yes, yes. If you and I have in my career asked great futurists how much of futurism is foresight
Mm,
and prediction rather than suggestion, right?
mm,
Suggesting something must happen, and therefore it does. And, the great people that I have met said it's about 50-50. So you're predicting what is happening, but you're suggesting what could be. And wow, you just ask Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel, uh, you know, he predicted that the price performance of chips would double every, on average, 18 months. And wow, if you listen to him talk, and I got a chance to meet him briefly around his 40th anniversary of Moore's Law, just 5 minutes, I had. I said, what's the most remarkable thing that you've seen since you made that prediction back in the 1960s? He said that they kept on creating engineers to live up to my prediction, and they kept on getting smarter. We didn't think we could solve the problem so those chips doubled in price performance, but they kept on making engineers smarter every generation, Craig. It's just remarkable, solving these problems that we didn't think we could solve. And you just think, Intel became great because they had this thing that they had to live up to, a prediction that they, a law that we must create chips. And so they did. So, wow, the prediction and the suggestion. There's one perfect example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so can we bring this all, can we crystallize it down to a personal level? How to be our own futurists. And we were talking about, I asked you before we hit record, have you had any epic fails? And you said, well, not with the businesses I've worked with, but personally, I have. And can you just talk to that a little bit? Not necessarily all about your own personal epic failures, but how we can be our creative futurists for us.
Yeah. Listen, I have had my own projects that have failed, and I've maybe made this suggestion that half of everything that you try, we should just write down to it's going to fail, and the other 50% is going to be successful. So let's just try as quickly as we possibly can. And that's why I always insist my clients do 90-day projects. And they go, 90 days? You can't do anything in 90 days. And I say, well, if you can't do it in 90 days, it's probably not going to be successful in the long term. But if we think about on the personal level, then what does that mean for us? If we are going to think a bit like futurists, steal some of the best ideas, if we summarize what we've talked about is, well, you've really got to take that time to be still and not be busy. You can't be creative, you can't think unless you've got that time to be still and think about things. What could be? What possibly could be? If you're busy doing, it's hard to practice foresight.
Yeah.
And there are some things, like you said the word, and I actually would like to credit Kevin Kelly, the great futurist co-founder of Wired magazine, wrote this great book a few years ago that everyone should read, The Inevitable. There are some things that are inevitable. In his book, all those years ago, before the pandemic, a couple of years before the pandemic, he talked about how it is inevitable that everything will become a subscription. Everything will become like Netflix. So if you're thinking about your business or your personal career, what does that mean? Does that mean we're not going to have jobs? We're going to have people who subscribe to what we do? Isn't that interesting? Or maybe I should be offering subscriptions to what I do. Isn't that interesting? So we need those times to reflect, look at the things that we think we're going to bet on. I would always bet on Kevin Kelly. If he says everything in the future is going to be a subscription, I've got to ask myself, what does that mean to me? How will I respond? How should I behave? What should I try? And these, I think, are the best things that futurism bring, is getting people to make a bet on the future, an optimistic future, and take action to have the best possible scenario outcome for themselves, their career, their family, or their business. And it really is so important, I think, to set aside that time. And it can't be just once a year. It really can't be. If you do it once a year, you're going to be so behind. And typically people just dabble in strategic planning, Sally. They're not very good at it. And I know because they admit it to me. And I say, use the tools that futurists do. I will reveal to you how I typically work with clients, if that might be inspiring.
It would be.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
So I thought to myself, artificial intelligence is inevitable. So as a futurist, as a strategic advisor, as a management consultant, I must understand how I can use AI better to serve my clients. So now when the steel industry or the insurance industry or the airline industry or the pork industry or the radiology industry asked me, Craig, can you come and work with us? I say, sure. Can I bring along my AI assistant, Athena? And Athena is an AI assistant that will look at 1 million sources all around the internet, anything that's not password protected. And if it's got anything to do with future forecasts or trends in any industry, she summarizes it, slices and dices it, puts it into charts and graphs automatically for me. And the time that it takes for me to go get a cup of coffee, I can come back and I've got a 77-page slide deck on the future of steel. Wow. And when I show this to clients, that's what they say. They go, wow, do you know how much time and money we spend on that? We will have 3 or 4 staff working on that for months. Some of my clients will say, you just did that in that time? I said, yes, but that's data. What we need to do to verify it is we need peer review. And so on this platform that I use, where Athena is, we have 21,000 futurists, and they all look at these trends as they're coming in, and they upvote them and downvote them. They give it a time frame of how long they think it's going to be short term, medium term, or long term. And then the impact. Is it going to be trillions of dollars, billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars? And so here we have data and we have peer review. And when I ask my clients, would you like me to bring along hundreds and hundreds of futurists and my AI assistant to look at what the future holds? They say, holy cow, we can't get that anywhere else. That's remarkable, Craig. Come and help us. Yeah. And I think to myself, we now have the tools where we can be superhuman employees, superhuman leaders, doctors, industry leaders, advisors, because we can use these tools that make us like superhumans. And for me, it's Athena. For every leader, I say to them, you must get an AI assistant, and you must also have a human assistant as well. You have to have both to help you be a leader these days. And if you're not, you're working way too hard. So that's how I typically work now. It used to be very hard to do an environmental scan. It would take months and months and months. And if you had undergraduates, that would be very helpful. But now we can do it with AI. And so just, your listeners should be thinking, let's look for those inevitable things. AI is inevitable. Personalized medicine, the Internet of Things. How will that affect my industry? How will that affect my company? How does that affect me? And how should I respond? And this, I think, is the greatest benefit that we bring to society as futurists, is getting people to consider, their best possible future.
Oh, Craig, thank you so much for this conversation, your generosity, and also thank you for your optimism. Because as you said, there is a lot of pessimism out there, and I think sometimes pessimism is cloaked as realism these days. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. I hope that's been helpful to your listeners, and they take something from that will change their life in some small way.
Well, I certainly have myself personally, and I'm sure listeners will as well. And I'm so grateful to you for your time and for sharing all of those insights and ideas and approaches too. And if people want to connect with you or buy your book, how do they do so, Craig?
Well, probably the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn.
Yep.
So just search for me, Craig Rispin, that's RISPIN, and send me a connection request and say, I heard you on Sally's podcast. So I know that where you're coming from. That'd be really helpful. And you can get my book on Amazon, How to Think Like a Futurist, and they will print it on demand and ship it to you anywhere in the world.
Isn't that great?
Oh, it's incredible. Yes. Well, it is an incredible time that we're living in.
Sure is. Well, Craig, thank you again. And listeners and watchers, thank you for joining us and being a part of this wonderful conversation and community. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you on the waves next time. Bye.
Bye now.